He watched everyone else fight for power, and he won by doing almost nothing. Lao Tzu, a man who barely left a trace in history. No grand monuments, no armies, no empire, just a few words that changed everything. And what he understood about power is the complete opposite of what we're taught today. Because most people think winning means pushing harder, working more, fighting stronger. But Lao Tzu discovered something that still sounds crazy. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. So picture this. Ancient China. About 2,500 years ago. Everyone's fighting for control. Warlords battling each other. Kings trying to expand their kingdoms. Philosophers arguing about who has the best system. It was noise, constant noise. Everyone trying to prove they were right. Everyone trying to force their way onto the world. And in the middle of all that chaos was Lao Tzu, an old man who worked as a record keeper, quiet, unknown, watching everything from the sidelines. And what he saw was exhausting. People destroying themselves, trying to get ahead. Burning themselves out, chasing power. Fighting battles that didn't need to be fought. He realized something that nobody else was seeing. All that effort, all that force, all that fighting, it wasn't making things better. It was making things worse. Because when you force things, you create resistance. When you push too hard, things break. When you try to control everything, you end up controlling nothing. So Lao Tzu started thinking about a different way. A way that didn't require force. A way that worked with life instead of against it. And what he came up with was so simple that most people dismissed it. They still do today. He said, stop trying so hard. Stop forcing, stop fighting. Just let things happen naturally. Now, before you think this is some lazy advice about doing nothing, let me explain what he actually meant. Because this is where most people get it wrong. Lao Tzu wasn't saying be passive. He wasn't saying give up. He wasn't saying let people walk all over you. He was saying something much deeper. He was saying that nature already knows how to work. Water already knows how to flow. Plants already know how to grow. And you already know what to do if you stop forcing and just pay attention. Think about water for a second. Water doesn't fight. It doesn't force its way through obstacles. But water always wins. It goes around, it goes under. It waits, and eventually, it shapes everything in its path. Rock, water breaks it down. Mountain, water carves through it. Fire, water puts it out. And it does all of this without effort, without struggle, without force. That's what Lao Tzu was teaching. Be like water. Don't fight what you can't change. Flow around obstacles instead of smashing into them. Be soft enough to adapt, but persistent enough to win. He said, the softest things in the world overcome the hardest things in the world. That sounds backwards, right? Because we're taught the opposite. We're taught to be tough, to push through, to never give up, to fight harder when things get difficult. And sometimes that works, but most of the time, it just exhausts you. Because here's what Lao Tzu understood. Force creates resistance. The harder you push, the harder life pushes back. You've experienced this. You try to force a conversation with someone and they shut down. You try to force a relationship and it falls apart. You try to force success and you burn out. But when you stop forcing, when you relax, when you let things unfold naturally, suddenly things get easier. Lao Tzu saw this pattern everywhere. In nature, in people, in politics. And he kept coming back to the same lesson. The best leaders don't force people to follow them. People want to follow them. The best teachers don't force knowledge into students. They create space for learning to happen. The best solutions don't require massive effort. They're simple and natural. He called this Wu Wei. It means doing without forcing, acting without strain, winning without fighting. And here's the part that blows people's minds. Wu Wei doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing exactly what's needed and nothing more. Think about a skilled athlete. They don't force their body to move. They don't tense up. They stay relaxed. They flow. And that's when they perform their best. Or think about a conversation. When you're trying too hard to be impressive, it's awkward. But when you relax and just talk naturally, that's when real connection happens. That's Wu Wei. That's power without force. But most of us never learn this. We think more effort always equals better results. So we push, we stress, we exhaust ourselves. And then we wonder why everything feels so hard. Lao Tzu would tell you it's hard because you're making it hard. You're forcing what should flow. You're fighting what should be easy. Now, here's where it gets practical. Because this isn't just ancient philosophy, this changes how you live your actual life right now. Let's say you're trying to solve a problem. You've been thinking about it for hours, stressing about it, forcing solutions that don't quite work. What does Lao Tzu say? Stop, walk away, do something else. Let your mind relax, and watch what happens. Suddenly, when you're not trying, the answer comes to you. In the shower, on a walk, right before you fall asleep, because your brain already knew the solution. You were just forcing too hard to see it. Or, let's say you're trying to convince someone of something. You're arguing, pushing your point, getting frustrated that they won't listen. What would Lao Tzu do? Stop arguing, stop pushing. Ask questions instead. Listen, create space for them to change their own mind, because you can't force someone to agree with you. The harder you push, the more they resist. But if you stop pushing, if you make them feel heard, suddenly they're open to your ideas. That's the power of doing less. That's Wu Wei in action. Here's another one. You want to be successful, so you work crazy hours. You stress constantly. You sacrifice everything trying to force your way to the top. But Lao Tzu would ask, what if you stopped forcing? What if you worked smarter instead of harder? What if you focused on the few things that actually matter instead of trying to do everything? Because success doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from doing the right things. And you can only see what the right things are when you stop forcing and start paying attention. The modern world has completely forgotten this. We worship hustle. We celebrate grinding. We think burnout is a badge of honor. But Lao Tzu would look at all of that and shake his head, because he already figured out that force doesn't work, that fighting against life exhausts you, that the people who try the hardest often achieve the least. He said, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. Think about that. Trees don't force themselves to grow. Rivers don't force themselves to flow. The sun doesn't force itself to rise. Everything happens naturally, without strain, without stress, and it all works perfectly. But humans, we think we're smarter than nature. We think we need to force everything, control everything, manage everything. And that's why we're exhausted. That's why we're stressed. That's why life feels like such a fight. Because we're fighting against the natural way things work instead of flowing with it. Now, I'm not saying never work hard. I'm not saying never put in effort. Sometimes you need to push. Sometimes you need to fight. But Lao Tzu's point is this. Most of the time, you're forcing things that don't need to be forced. Most of the time, you're creating problems by trying too hard to solve them. And if you could just relax, just let go, just trust the process, you'd get better results with less effort. That's the real power. Not the power to force your will on the world, but the power to align yourself with how things naturally work. Water doesn't beat rock by being harder than rock. It beats rock by being water, by flowing, by being patient, by being persistent without being forceful. You don't win by being something you're not. You win by being yourself. But relaxed, natural, flowing instead of forcing. This is what Lao Tzu spent his life teaching. And then, according to legend, he disappeared. Just rode off on a water buffalo and was never seen again. No grand exit, no monument, no legacy carved in stone. Just a small book of wisdom that people are still reading thousands of years later. Because he didn't force his ideas on anyone. He didn't fight to be remembered. He just shared what he knew and let it flow where it needed to go. And that's the ultimate example of his teaching. He won without fighting. He influenced millions without forcing. He became timeless by not trying to be. So here's the lesson for you. Stop forcing. Stop fighting battles that don't need to be fought. Stop trying so hard that you lose sight of what actually works. Pay attention to what flows naturally. Do what needs to be done and nothing more. Be like water, soft but powerful, gentle but unstoppable. Because the hardest thing to learn is that sometimes doing less is doing more. That sometimes not fighting is how you win. That sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Lao Tzu figured this out 2,500 years ago. And it's still true today. The power isn't in forcing, it's in flowing. And once you understand that, everything changes. Subscribe for more ancient wisdom that actually works.